The hum of the server room was the only sound that usually cut through the pristine silence of my office. It was my sanctuary, a meticulously crafted world of chrome and glass, a physical manifestation of the life I'd built from nothing. Every piece of art, every meticulously chosen furnishing, was a testament to my hard work, a silent fuck you to a past I'd tried desperately to bury. Tuesday? Just another Tuesday. Reviewing investment portfolios, pretending the numbers on the screen were more interesting than the ache in my gut. I swiveled my chair, the plush leather cool against my skin. Outside, the Seattle skyline gleamed, a concrete and steel reminder of how far I'd climbed. Then the phone buzzed. An unknown number. Normally I'd let it go to voicemail, lost in the sea of spam. But this time, something different. A prickle of unease. An intuition that had been honed by years of self-reliance. I grabbed it. Hello? My voice was clipped, professional. Is this Eleanor? The voice on the other end was hesitant, wavering. It was familiar, like a half-forgotten nightmare. My breath hitched. That voice. Who is this? A shaky inhale. It's Mom. My hand tightened on the phone, the plastic digging into my palm. Mom. 12 years. 12 years of careful distance, of meticulously constructed walls. 12 years of pretending they didn't exist, hoping they'd do the same for me. What do you want? The words came out colder than I intended, a shard of ice in the quiet room. Another pause, heavy with unspoken guilt. Your father, Daniel, he's very sick, Ellie. The doctors, they don't think he has much time. Her voice cracked, a manufactured fragility that used to make my heart ache. Now it just grated. We want you to come home, to make peace, to say goodbye. The modern art on the wall swam in my vision, its abstract shapes mocking the chaos erupting inside me. Outside, the world kept spinning, oblivious to the emotional earthquake that had just ripped through my carefully curated life. I'll think about it, I managed, the words a choked whisper. I slammed the hang-up button before she could start the manipulation. The guilt trip I knew she had perfected. The memories crashed in, a tidal wave of resentment and pain. The years I'd spent building this life, this fortress of success, were all in service of not being them. And now here they were. From the moment my little sister Clara was born, just 2 years after me, the dynamic was set. I was Eleanor, the responsible one, the stoic one, the one who didn't need. Clara was, Clara, a whirlwind of charm and need, the sun around which our parents orbited. Every birthday, every Christmas, every goddamn Tuesday, it was the same. Clara got the extravagant gifts, the princess dresses, the overflowing plate of dessert. I got the hand-me-downs, the practical gifts, the lectures about being a good big sister. When Clara wanted my new watercolor set in the 2nd grade, Mom made me share. You know how creative your sister is, Ellie. She needs to express herself. Clara, of course, promptly ruined them, mixing all the colors into a muddy brown that smeared across the paper. When she accidentally lost my favorite stuffed rabbit, more like threw it in the trash during a tantrum, Dad just shrugged. Accidents happen, Ellie. You're a big girl, you'll be okay. But the most infuriating part was the unwavering praise, the constant validation Clara received for even the smallest accomplishments. Every good grade was a party, every clumsy attempt at piano a masterpiece. My straight A's were simply expected. That's what we expect from you, Eleanor. You're smart. You're reliable. I learned to be invisible, to get my validation from other people, to be successful enough that they couldn't ignore me. At 16, I started working at Burger Bliss, flipping patties and mopping floors. Sarah, the manager, became my surrogate mother, teaching me about work ethic, about saving, about standing up for myself. The incident with the phone, that was the turning point. That was when I truly understood the depth of their favoritism, the unshakable bond they had with Clara. It was so unfair. I'd scraped and saved for months, every greasy dollar earned under the scorching heat lamps, to buy myself a smartphone. Nothing fancy, just a basic model that would allow me to apply for summer programs. $300 was all it cost. The day I brought it home, Clara exploded. "I want one too!" she shrieked, her face contorted with rage. "Eleanor, give it to me." "No." I stood my ground, clutching the phone to my chest. "I bought this with my own money. You can get a job too." Clara burst into tears, a theatrical performance that always worked. "Mom! Dad!" Eleanor's being mean. They came running, of course, their faces etched with concern for their precious Clara. "Eleanor," my father said, his voice dripping with disappointment, "why are you being so selfish? Your sister just wants to see your phone." "Because it's mine," I shouted, my voice trembling. "I worked for it. Every single dollar." "You're supposed to love your sister," my mother chimed in, her disappointment palpable. "How can you be so cruel? We raised you better than this." I looked at them, really looked at them, and something inside me shattered. This wasn't normal. This wasn't love. This was a sickness. And I was done pretending it was okay. "I do love her," I said quietly, the fight draining out of me. "But that doesn't mean I have to give her everything I own." I retreated to my room, locking the door against their shouts and Clara's crocodile tears. That night, I started researching colleges far, far away from this house, from this family, from this suffocating favoritism. The acceptance letter from University of Washington was a beacon in the darkness. I screamed, I cried, I jumped up and down. This was my chance. The acceptance letter offered a partial scholarship, a small victory that fueled my determination, but I still needed about $20,000 to cover tuition, housing, and books. I needed to find a way to get the remaining money to attend. I was aware of the money my grandfather had left for our education. I was there when he told Mom and Dad, "Make sure both the girls get their schooling." That's what this is for. I drove home, fueled by hope, clinging to the naive belief that maybe, just maybe, things would be different. Maybe they'd be proud. Maybe they'd finally see me. They were in the living room, Clara sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone, Mom and Dad glued to the TV. "I got accepted," I announced, waving the letter, "to University of Washington. They're even giving me a partial scholarship." Mom muted the TV. Dad shifted in his chair. Clara didn't even look up. "That's nice, honey," Mom said, her tone flat. "The program is exactly what I want to do," I insisted. "And with Grandpa's money, I should be able to cover the rest of the tuition." Dad cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. "About that money," my stomach churned. A premonition of disaster. "What about it? We don't have it anymore." The world tilted. "What do you mean?" "Grandpa left that money specifically for our education. Both of us." Mom smoothed her skirt, a nervous habit. "We had to make some choices. Investment opportunities came up. And what about Clara's college fund?" I demanded, already knowing the answer. Dad chuckled, a hollow, mirthless sound. "Don't worry about your sister's education. We've got that covered." "So you spent my portion," I said slowly, each word laced with disbelief. "You spent the money Grandpa left for my education, but kept Clara safe?" "Don't be dramatic, Eleanor," Mom said, her voice sharp. "You're good at figuring things out. You'll find a way." I looked at them, really looked at them. At Mom's expensive jewelry, at Dad's golf clubs in the corner, at Clara's designer clothes and brand new car. "You're telling me," I said, my voice shaking with rage, "that you spent the money my grandfather left for my education on stuff? On yourselves?" "Watch your tone," Dad warned, his face hardening. "No," I screamed. "I won't watch my tone. This is wrong. This is so wrong. Grandpa wanted that money to go to both of us." "Get out," Mom shrieked, her face flushed. "Just get out. Until you can speak to us with respect." I stormed out of the house, slamming the door with all my might. The next day was a blur of anger and despair. I went through the motions at Burger Bliss, mechanically flipping burgers and serving fries, my mind racing, trying to figure out what to do. Sarah saw something was wrong, but she didn't push. That's why I loved her. When I got home that afternoon, my key wouldn't work in the lock. I fumbled with it, panic rising in my throat. Then I saw them. My suitcases, the old battered ones from the basement, sitting on the porch, stuffed with my clothes, some haphazardly folded, others just shoved in. "Mom?" I called out, knocking on the door, my voice cracking. "Dad? You're not welcome here anymore." Mom's voice came through the door, cold and hard. "We won't have that kind of disrespect in this house." "Are you serious?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're kicking me out? Because I was upset that you stole my college money?" "Don't be so dramatic," she replied. "You're 18 now, an adult. Time to figure things out on your own." I stood there, staring at those suitcases, the pathetic remnants of my life, trying not to cry. Cars passed by on the street, neighbors who'd known me my whole life driving past like nothing was wrong, like my parents hadn't just thrown me out. "What about Clara?" I asked, my voice breaking. Would you ever do this to her?" There was no answer, just silence. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking, and dialed my Aunt, Regina, Mom's sister. She was the only sane person in that whole damn family. She answered on the second ring. "Eleanor? What's wrong? You sound upset?" I spilled everything, the words tumbling out between sobs, about the college acceptance, about Grandpa's money, about being locked out. "Stay right there," she said firmly. "Your Uncle Mark and I are coming to get you." 45 minutes later, their car pulled up. Uncle Mark loaded my suitcases into the trunk while Aunt Regina hugged me tight. "I'm so sorry, sweetie," she whispered, her voice full of anger. "This isn't right." That night, sitting in their guest room, Aunt Regina and Uncle Mark came in with a check. "We want to help with your college tuition," Aunt Regina said, her eyes filled with sympathy. "It's not everything, but it's what we can do. I'll pay you back," I promised through tears. "Every penny." "We know you will," Uncle Mark said, squeezing my shoulder. "Because, unlike some people, we know exactly who you are and what you're capable of." I looked at that check. $20,000. Enough to cover what the scholarship didn't. Enough to change my life. The next 12 years were a whirlwind of hard work and relentless ambition. College was brutal, but exhilarating. I threw myself into my studies, working part-time at the university library to cover living expenses. I made Dean's List every semester. I landed prestigious internships during the summers. And every month, I painstakingly put aside money to repay Aunt Regina and Uncle Mark. During those 4 years, my phone never rang with calls from my parents or Clara. Sometimes, I'd catch myself wondering what they were doing, but then I'd remember the suitcases on the doorstep and force myself to focus on my future instead. My first job offer came 2 months before graduation. A junior analyst position at Sterling Investments. The starting salary was more than I'd ever dreamed of. The day I signed the contract, I called Aunt Regina. "I did it," I told her, my voice shaking with excitement. "They want me to start right after graduation." "Of course, they do," she said, her voice brimming with pride. "You're exceptional, Eleanor. You always have been." I stayed in Seattle, starting in a tiny studio apartment that barely fit my bed and a desk. But I didn't care. It was mine. Every morning, I'd wake up at 5 a.m., hit the gym, and be at my desk by 7:30. Every evening, I'd stay late, learning everything I could from my colleagues. My boss, Vivian, a woman with a ruthless intelligence and a heart of gold, took me under her wing. "You've got something special," she told me one night as we worked on a major client presentation. "You're hungry, but not desperate. Driven, but not reckless. We need more people like you." 3 years in, I made senior analyst. 2 years after that, investment manager. My salary doubled, then tripled. I moved from my studio to a luxury apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a breathtaking view of the city. I bought my first Porsche, a sleek silver machine that purred with power. I paid off my debt to Aunt Regina and Uncle Mark in full, though they tried to refuse the money. "We didn't help you, so you'd pay us back," Aunt Regina protested. "I know," I told her, my voice thick with emotion. "You helped me because you love me, but I'm paying you back because I love you too. And because I keep my promises." I traveled the world, Paris, Tokyo, Sydney, posted pictures on social media of sunsets in Santorini and snow-capped peaks in Switzerland. I never blocked my family, Clara and my parents, on social media, but I never looked at their profiles either. Let them see my success if they wanted to. I was done looking back, until that phone call. The week after my mother's call, I found myself driving down the familiar streets of my hometown. It was strange, seeing everything again after so long. The town seemed smaller somehow, less significant, like a stage set dismantled after the final performance. I pulled up to my parents' house in my Porsche, the polished metal gleaming incongruously against the backdrop of faded clapboard and overgrown flower beds. I adjusted my designer sunglasses in the rearview mirror, taking a deep breath. The house hadn't changed much. Same peeling paint, same crooked mailbox. But now, I saw the signs of neglect, the subtle decay that had been invisible to me as a child. My mother opened the door before I could knock. She'd aged. Her hair was streaked with gray, and the lines around her mouth were deeper, etched with worry and regret. "Eleanor," she breathed, reaching for a hug. I stiffened, resisting the touch. "Where's Daniel?" I asked, stepping past her into the house. The interior smelled the same, a cloying mix of potpourri and old furniture. "He's in the living room," she said, hurrying ahead of me, her voice tinged with anxiety. "He's having a good day today." I wasn't prepared for how frail my father looked. The man who'd once seemed so powerful and imposing was now slumped in his recliner, his skin papery and translucent. His eyes lit up when he saw me, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a glimmer of the father I remembered. "Eleanor," he said, his voice weak but still carrying that familiar note of authority. "You came?" "I did," I replied, sitting in the chair across from him, keeping a safe distance. "You look unwell." He laughed, a dry, rattling sound that quickly turned into a cough. "Always direct, weren't you?" "Cancer's a bitch." "Doctors say I've got a few months, maybe less." My mother hovered nearby, wringing her hands. "I made your old room up for you. Everything's just like you left it." I almost laughed at that. Nothing was like I'd left it. They'd made sure of that, 12 years ago. "Where's Clara?" I asked, noting my sister's absence. "Oh, she's out with friends," Mom said quickly, too quickly. "She'll be back for dinner." "She's so excited to see you." I doubted that, but nodded anyway. We made awkward small talk for a while. They asked about my job, my apartment, my car. I gave short, polite answers, watching them exchange glances when they thought I wasn't looking. That evening, Clara finally showed up, dressed in designer clothes that looked brand new. She'd gained weight, but her face was still pretty, still holding that look of perpetual entitlement that I remembered so well. "Eleanor," she squealed, throwing her arms around me as if we were best friends who'd just been apart for a weekend. "Oh my God, is that a Rolex? It's gorgeous." Dinner was a surreal affair. Mom had made all my favorite childhood dishes, as if food could bridge a 12-year gap of betrayal and silence. Dad ate little, mostly pushing food around his plate. Clara chattered endlessly about her friends, her social life, her plans to start a fashion blog. "Speaking of plans," Dad said suddenly, setting down his fork, his eyes gleaming. "Eleanor, there's something important we need to discuss." I saw Mom tense up, saw Clara's eyes dart between our parents. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just about saying goodbye to a dying father. This was something else entirely. "What is it?" I asked, my voice flat. Dad leaned forward, his face grave. I need you to promise me something, Eleanor. A dying man's wish, if you will. I waited, my hand tightening around my water glass. After I'm gone, he continued, his voice strained, I need to know that Clara will be taken care of, that she'll be able to maintain her lifestyle. And you, well, you're in a position to ensure that happens. The room went silent. I could hear the tick of the clock on the wall, the hum of the refrigerator, the thunderous beating of my own heart. You want me to what? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Mom jumped in, her face flushed. To help your sister financially. You're doing so well, Eleanor. You have more than enough to. I stood up from the dinner table, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor, the sound echoing in the suffocating silence. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice rising. You called me here, after 12 years of silence, to ask me to financially support my fully capable adult sister? Eleanor, please sit down, Mom pleaded, her voice laced with desperation. You're making this more dramatic than it needs to be. More dramatic? I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You kicked me out of this house. You left my belongings in suitcases on the doorstep. You spent my college money that Grandpa specifically left for my education. And now you want me to support Clara? Clara spoke up, her voice whiny. It's not fair that you have so much money and won't share it. You've always been selfish. I turned to look at her. Really, look at her. Designer dress, expensive jewelry, perfectly manicured nails, all paid for by Mom and Dad, even now when she was 30 years old. What exactly have you been doing these past 12 years, Clara? I asked, my voice dripping with disdain. While I was working 60-hour weeks, building my career, what were you doing? I've been finding myself, she replied defensively. Not all of us want to be corporate slaves. Finding yourself on Mom and Dad's dime, I sneered. And now that Dad's sick, you're worried about losing your meal ticket, aren't you? Don't talk to your sister that way, Mom snapped, her face contorted with anger. She's sensitive. She needs to grow up, I shouted, the years of pent-up resentment finally exploding. She needs to learn how to support herself. She needs to stop depending on everyone else to fund her lifestyle. My father slammed his fist on the table, though with less force than I remembered from childhood. Enough! I'm dying, Eleanor. My last wish is to know that my youngest daughter will be taken care of. And what about your oldest daughter? I asked quietly, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion. Did you ever want to take care of me? The silence that followed was deafening, a confirmation of everything I'd ever suspected. I grabbed my purse from the back of my chair. I'm leaving, I announced, my voice shaking. This was a mistake. Eleanor, please. Mom followed me to the door, her voice desperate. Think about what you're doing. Think about your father's last wish. I turned to face her, my eyes blazing. I'll help pay for Dad's medical bills if he needs it. But I will not support Clara. That's my final answer. I walked out of the house, ignoring my mother's desperate calls and my sister's dramatic sobs. I drove away, tears blurring my vision. I pulled over after a few blocks, my hands shaking too badly to drive safely. I took a deep breath, trying to regain control. Then I called Aunt Regina. They want me to support Clara, I said, my voice raw with anger and betrayal. Can you believe that? Oh, Eleanor, she sighed, her voice full of sadness. I was afraid it might be something like that. Your sister hasn't worked a day in her life, and your parents, they've enabled her for so long. The next 2 days were a blur of angry phone calls and vicious text messages. My mother and sister bombarded my phone with guilt trips and accusations. You're killing your father with your selfishness, Mom texted. You've always been jealous of me, Clara wrote. You're just trying to punish me. I saved every message, knowing I might need them later, but I didn't respond. The manipulation was transparent, the guilt trips hollow. When Mom called again, I turned on my phone's recording app before answering. Eleanor, she started immediately, her voice shrill with anger. How can you be so cold? So selfish? Your sister needs you. I'm willing to help Daniel, I replied calmly, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. But Clara is an adult. She needs to support herself. You're not worth your sister's little finger. Mom spat, her voice dripping with venom. We should never have called you. I ended the call, my hands shaking, and sat in my office, staring out at the city skyline, the glittering lights blurring through my tears. Then, I opened my laptop and navigated to my mother's social media page. There it was! A long, carefully crafted post about her heartless daughter who refused to help her dying father. The comments were filled with condolences and accusations, relatives and family friends expressing their shock and disappointment in me. Something snapped inside me. 12 years of silence, and this was how they wanted to play it? Fine. I wrote my own post, attaching screenshots of the texts and the recorded call. I told the whole story, the childhood favoritism, the stolen college money, the eviction, everything. I ended it with the truth about their recent contact. Not that they wanted to reconcile, but that they wanted me to financially support my able-bodied adult sister. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments flooded in, people expressing their shock, not at me, but at my parents. Family members I hadn't spoken to in years reached out privately, many sharing their own stories of witnessing the favoritism but never speaking up. Mom tried to defend herself in the comments, but each explanation just dug her deeper. Even her closest friends couldn't support her, asking why she would enable one daughter over the other, especially at this critical time. 6 months later, Aunt Regina called to tell me Daniel had passed away. Mom hadn't invited me to the funeral, one final act of petty revenge. I sent a large bouquet of flowers anyway, with a card that read simply, "Goodbye, Daniel." That was 3 months ago. Through Aunt Regina, I hear that Mom is struggling to maintain their lifestyle on what Daniel left her. Clara throws tantrums about not being able to afford her usual shopping sprees and restaurant meals. Sometimes, I wonder if they've learned anything from all of this, if they understand the consequences of their actions. But deep down, I know they haven't. Last week, I got another call from an unknown number. This time, I let it go to voicemail. It was Clara, her voice pleading, asking if I'd reconsider helping her, just until she gets on her feet. I deleted the message without responding. Sitting in my office now, looking at the life I've built for myself, I feel at peace with my decisions. I'm sorry I never got to truly reconcile with Daniel, but I'm not sorry I stood my ground. Some people might call me cold or unforgiving, but I learned long ago that maintaining healthy boundaries isn't the same as being cruel. They call it selfishness, I call it self-preservation. I glance at the photo on my desk, me with Aunt Regina and Uncle Mark at my last birthday celebration. They're my real family, the ones who believed in me, supported me, and loved me unconditionally. Blood might be thicker than water, as they say, but love is thicker than blood, and real love doesn't come with conditions or price tags. My phone buzzes. A text from Aunt Regina asking if I'm still coming for Sunday dinner. I smile and text back a quick yes. Wouldn't miss it. Some bridges stay burned for a reason, but others grow stronger with time. I've learned to know the difference. Weeks turned into months. The initial storm of social media outrage subsided, replaced by a low hum of gossip. Distant relatives who I hadn't spoken to in years sent awkward, vaguely apologetic messages on Facebook. Old high school classmates liked my posts, a silent acknowledgement of the past. I tried to ignore it all, focusing on my work, on my life, on the things that brought me joy. I took a pottery class, rediscovered my love for hiking, and even tentatively started dating again. But the ghost of my family lingered, a constant shadow in the corners of my mind. Sometimes, late at night, when the city fell silent and the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator, I'd find myself wondering about Mom and Clara. Were they truly struggling? Had they learned anything from the experience? or were they simply waiting for the right moment to try and manipulate me again? One rainy afternoon, I was sorting through some old boxes in my storage unit when I stumbled upon a forgotten treasure, a box of photos from my childhood. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding, before lifting the lid. There I was, a skinny, awkward girl with gap teeth and a lopsided grin. There were pictures of birthday parties, of Christmas mornings, of family vacations. In almost every photo, Clara was front and center, radiant and smiling, while I stood awkwardly in the background, a silent observer. But then I found a few that caught my eye. A picture of me and Daniel building a sandcastle on the beach. A snapshot of me and Mom laughing as we decorated Christmas cookies. A candid shot of Clara and me holding hands as we walked to school. For a moment, the old feelings rushed back. The love, the longing, the desperate desire for connection. But then, I remembered the suitcases on the doorstep, the stolen college money, the years of neglect and manipulation, and the wave of emotion receded, leaving behind a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I carefully closed the box, pushing it back into the depths of the storage unit. Some memories were best left buried. A year passed. My career continued to flourish. My apartment felt more like home, and my relationship with Alex, a kind and compassionate architect, deepened. He was everything my parents weren't: supportive, understanding, and genuinely interested in my happiness. One evening, as we were cooking dinner together, Alex turned to me, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "I have a surprise for you," he said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. My heart leaped into my throat. Was this really happening? He opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. "Eleanor," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in my eyes. "Yes," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." We embraced, laughing and crying, lost in our own little world. For the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely loved. As I looked down at the sparkling ring on my finger, a thought crossed my mind. I had to tell Aunt Regina and Uncle Mark. They deserved to be the first to know. I grabbed my phone and dialed their number. As soon as Aunt Regina answered, I burst into tears again. "What's wrong, sweetie?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "I'm engaged," I blurted out, my voice shaking with excitement. "Alex proposed. I'm getting married." There was a moment of silence. Then Aunt Regina let out a whoop of joy. "Oh, Eleanor, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you. You deserve all the happiness in the world." We talked for hours, making plans for the wedding, discussing the guest list, and dreaming about the future. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of peace and contentment that I hadn't felt in years. I was building a new life, a life filled with love, joy, and genuine connection. And this time, it was a life I was choosing, a life I was creating on my own terms. A few weeks later, as I was sorting through the mail, I noticed a familiar return address. My mother's. My heart skipped a beat. What could she possibly want now? I hesitated for a moment before opening the envelope. Inside, there was a formal invitation. Clara's wedding? A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. Shock, anger, resentment, and a faint flicker of curiosity. I stared at the invitation, my mind racing. Should I go? Could I face them after everything that had happened? On the one hand, it felt like a betrayal of everything I stood for, a validation of their past behavior. On the other hand, it was an opportunity to show them how far I'd come, to prove that I was no longer the skinny, awkward girl they used to ignore. I showed the invitation to Alex, explaining the history, the pain, the complicated relationship I had with my family. He listened patiently, his eyes full of understanding. "It's your decision, Eleanor," he said gently. "But I'll support you no matter what you choose. Just do what feels right for you." I thought about it for days, weighing the pros and cons, agonizing over the decision. Finally, I came to a conclusion. I wasn't going to go to Clara's wedding. Not because I was afraid of them, not because I was still angry, but because I had nothing to gain from it. I had moved on, I had built a new life, and I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their toxic world. I wrote a polite but firm note, declining the invitation, and sent it back to my mother. Then, I put the whole thing out of my mind and focused on my own wedding, on my own future. The day of Clara's wedding arrived. I woke up feeling strangely calm, at peace with my decision. Alex and I spent the day hiking in the mountains, breathing in the fresh air and enjoying the stunning scenery. We talked about our future, about our hopes and dreams, about the life we were building together. As the sun began to set, we found a secluded spot overlooking the city. We sat down on a blanket, holding hands, watching the lights twinkle below. "Are you okay?" Alex asked, his voice full of concern. "Are you sure you made the right decision?" I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Yes," I said confidently. "I'm exactly where I need to be." I knew that walking away from my family was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was also the best thing I'd ever done. It had allowed me to heal, to grow, and to create a life that was truly my own. A life filled with love, joy, and genuine connection. And as I looked into Alex's eyes, I knew that I had finally found my forever family. A family that loved me for who I was, not for who they wanted me to be. Our wedding was small, intimate, and filled with love. Aunt Regina and Uncle Mark walked me down the aisle, their eyes brimming with pride. Vivian, my boss and mentor, gave a heartfelt toast, praising my strength, my resilience, and my unwavering commitment to success. As I stood at the altar, holding Alex's hand, I realized that I had finally created the family I had always longed for. A family that was based on love, trust, and mutual respect. A family that would support me through thick and thin, celebrate my triumphs, and comfort me in my sorrows. A family that would always have my back. The music started, and Alex and I began to dance, twirling around the floor, lost in our own little world. As I looked into his eyes, I knew that I had finally found my happy ending. A happy ending that was all the more precious, because I had fought so hard to achieve it. And as the night drew to a close, I made a promise to myself. I would never let anyone, not even my own family, take that happiness away from me. I would continue to build a life that was filled with love, joy, and purpose. A life that was worthy of the sacrifices I had made, and I would always remember the lessons I had learned along the way. That blood isn't always thicker than water. That family isn't always who you're born with. And that sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and create your own destiny. That I did. The most important thing about this story is that I walked away and found my own destiny. I will never let anyone take that away from me.